Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles to Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast, where I look to distill the best practices and best ideas of the world's most successful families and their family offices. I hope to provide thought-provoking opinions and feature amazing thought leaders to our listeners of the podcast with an eye towards the future of the family office. Today's podcast is titled Chief Mentor of Next Gen Leaders, Jason Ma. Jason Ma is the Next Gen foremost mentoring coach for college admissions, high-end career, leadership, and life success. He has inspired and guided one-on-one hundreds of Generation Z, Millennial, and Gen X leaders to be achievers and transform upward and accomplish with great outcomes. Pragmatic, emotional, social, and leadership intelligence, what he calls, which we'll get into, 3EQ. He also has helped selected tech companies, C-suite executives, and family offices grow strategically and pragmatically to next levels by applying his business acumen and engaging the global network of Forbes global CEOs, Fortune 500 C-level executives, G20 business and education leaders, and other decision makers. Jason Ma is the founder and CEO and chief mentor at 3EQ. He's an acclaimed author, Young Leaders 3.0, international speaker, masterclass leader, a member of the Future Work and Educational Task Force at the B20/G20. Jason Ma, welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you for inviting, Angelo.
You're very kind. It's so great to have you on. I have so much I want to discuss in areas pertaining to leadership and productivity enhancement, and our children, our grandchildren, our next gen are probably, as a combination, probably my favorite subject to kind of talk about. So we've been lucky to have some great guests on, and I've done similar interviews on stage with Tony Robbins on this kind of subject. So you're also a global thought leader. It's really an honor to have you on. And let's get right to it. And as my audience knows, I am going to bounce around so much and then come back to it. It's going to be a little crazy, but I just have so much to ask Jason. But I'm going to lead, given your unique background of working with some amazing young people, sometimes as young as middle school, let alone into high school, with them finding their passion to purpose and putting a plan together to get into the right college for them. It may not, the parents may have a different perspective, but I want to hear how you work with young people, whether middle schoolers or high schoolers, to help them find what's going to be the best fit for them.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic kind of, jumping off point and a topic to talk about that's pretty much within the Gen Z bracket, if you will, of the life stage in a person's life. Think about that, right? I mean, I hate to overly generalize, but just for conversation's sake, Gen Z is probably up to around age 25. And that includes, for our purposes, the middle school kids, the high school kids, the college and university kids, and some graduate school kids, right? And then the millennials are kind of around 26 to up to age 39 or so. And then the Gen Xers would be around 40 to around age 54, 55.
I am the oldest Gen Xer, Jason, 1965.
Dude, you're my younger brother, believe it or not, even though I joke around, I look like I graduated high school, but I'm actually—
You do have a young look.
Thank you, thank you.
It's a positive thing.
It's a positive thing. It's not all Asian American genes, but I think I implement what I teach, right? Partially. Now, back to your question about college and high school. Think about that. If you are in, I think about middle school as pre-high school. Let's keep it simple, okay? High school, for most families, the kid, the Gen Xer, the next gener, and then the matriarch and patriarch, right? The most important goal for most people is really about college admissions, correct? That's it. But what I find is that, given all the media-induced hype out there, now I have a term, it's called college admission myopia, because in Silicon Valley, in the South Bay, I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley, right? When you look around the country, Silicon Valley, Manhattan, Boston, And then outside of the country, then you got Seoul, you got Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, right? So many tiger parents, if you will, right? I mean, so I met parents that, oh, help me guarantee my kid's gonna get to Harvard. I said, it doesn't work like that, okay? Have you heard about the college admission cheating scandal? You don't wanna be one of that, right? You don't wanna be blacklisted by Stanford, by Harvard, because they have a lot of power, no matter what. They reject students whose parents donate millions all the time right now. Why? Supply and demand. They got so many. They got so many, right? Now, what I find is that I love coaching young people because they're malleable. Their prefrontal cortex is still not even halfway developed, right? I mean, it's not going to start developing. My Gen Z daughters included, they're 23 and 20. I joke around with them, hey, Dudette, your prefrontal cortex, the command center, is still developing. You're not there yet, even though you are very successful, right? Doing good things. My younger daughters are a Google engineer and one goes to Wharton as a junior. Now, what I find is that it is just as important as getting into a best fit top college as high as possible. You don't want to stretch it. You want to find the best fit, but it's just as important to hone into them what I call pragmatic 3EQ, emotional, social, and leadership intelligence. Cross-referenced by what I call visionary, story, your belief system, and then your emotional and mental state of mind management, and then your strategies and execution, along with soft skills and talent development early on. The reason I do that I find to be very successful. Now, I've been doing success mentoring, coaching, applied research, speaking, and writing books, and I wrote for Forbes. I got 1.5 million views just out of some articles, right? And so what I have come up with is a framework and pattern recognition on things that work, things that don't work. And I find it just as instructive to hone into the mind, soul, and physiology of these young people, a very strong personal operating system, personal OS, Silicon Valley speak, right? And apps in your system. Because they are very digital citizens. They think digital. And sometimes, in fact, my kids, they never use a fax machine. It's so funny, right?
Same here.
They rarely use an analog phone. I haven't used a wireline
And
phone.
email, that's like what we use.
Right, TikTok might be kicked out of US, they're kicked out of I mean, they're on Instagram, they're on Snapchat, right? So now back to the college and high school. In most cases, parents and students still like to go to the best college possible. These days, things are getting even more hyper competitive for achievers. Would you agree? I mean, the world's changing so fast. It's so turbulent, especially given COVID, right? Even at a B20, G20, we pivoted, and now we're focusing on solving COVID-induced global economic crisis, right? Make sure to do things where, the labor force, individually, organizationally, it's going to be adaptable and resilient, to the terms that you use quite a bit, right? Along with all sorts of soft skills, along with, say, stripping away stupidities in the bureaucracies per country, so that you could help grease the path for entrepreneurs, for family businesses, et cetera, right? So why don't I do that early on and hone and groom the kids so that they are so strong or stronger than the peers around them? I keep telling a lot of my students, right? Imagine you graduate from, Harvard or, Wharton, Stanford, Georgetown, or whatever good tier schools, right? You're going to work with some of your peers, but imagine that Mr. Ma trained you in a way early on to groom you so that you're so strong that some of them is going to end up working for you, right? And along the way, I always have what's in the mind of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, right? What's in the mind? They want peace of mind. They want to enhance family relationships. They want to mitigate risk of opportunity loss, preferably with sound family values and principles. Isn't it true? Along the way, by doing that, you actually help ease their succession planning. So that as a patriarch and matriarch, then I feel good about transferring part of my wealth. I feel good that you're going to help take care of a family business. In most cases, young people do that. They're going to go do their own things. But kind of depends on the family. How do you gel them and guide them in ways where I also kind of assist the family office executives so that they are smarter, they're more tuned up in how they work, right? So that the major players in the entire mini enterprise, that's called a family, right? The next geners, the matriarchs and patriarchs, and the family executives are pretty much moving in the same direction with less bumps in the road, and they're happier. At the end of the day, it's about relationships, you know?
So a couple of questions that I'm going to have based on that is getting back to the importance of college. So probably my favorite podcaster at the moment, as if the audience is waiting on bated breath for this, he's very well known. His name is James Altucher. And he's been talking about for a while, and a lot of really smart people, including people like Peter Thiel, have questioned in today's world, and even Sir Ken Robinson with his famous YouTube TED Talk, I'm sorry, the importance of college. That is an antiquated system that much of what we learn, let's be honest, probably as much as 80%, it's just not going to be applicable to who we are and what we're going to do. The parents or the kids are spending a truckload of money. Not everyone comes from a very wealthy family. They're now exiting college at 22, potentially with $100,000 to $250,000 of debt. This is a generation, the Gen Z and millennials, that sometimes look a little bleakly at our upcoming future. And I could make the argument, now don't get me wrong, I have a rising senior, he better go to college. But if he were to tell me, and he has, that I want to start a business, I'm a little hard pressed to come up with answers what college is really going to do for him. Okay, so he knows how to use a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, but how much do you really learn is going to be applicable? Is he almost better off, like Thiel talks about, starting a business, learning, failing, rising, resilience, and grit? Why don't I stop there and get your opinion?
Oh man, I get asked these questions all the time. It's a great set of questions, by the way. There are multiple questions within your set of questions here.
Oh, there is.
Now, first of all, Peter Thiel, it's a great guy. I was actually a Thiel Fellowship mentor before.
Oh.
And that's antithetical against these elite college admissions, right? Because they do not, in fact, they got stopouts from Harvard, stopouts from Berkeley, stopouts from Stanford, stopouts from, kind of Wharton, et cetera, to take 2 years off and get a fellowship or grant for $100K. They could spend it any way they want, preferably within the entrepreneurship endeavors. And now those kids are actually anomalies. Those are actually outliers. Most kids are not like that. Those are spectacular entrepreneurial kids. Some of them fail still, right? And a few of them actually did quite well. A few of them actually kind of end up getting the company valued at a couple of $100 million, et cetera. But those are like tiny, tiny fraction of 1% of youth at that age bracket, right? At the late teens, at the early 20s, correct? Now, where Sir Ken Robinson's coming from is that the school system, especially the public school, in fact, a whole bunch of private schools as well. In the United States, about 30,000 plus public schools, right? Thousands of private schools, plus those around the world. It's still implementing what I call a factory processing, super outdated, 1.5 century behind schedule, outdated, yes. Period 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stupid framework system, okay? It's called government indoctrinated camp, kind of, right? Now, that elephant in the room is like a massive set of sea carriers in the sea. You cannot pivot and move very quickly. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot of legacies, systems, people, etc. Right? It's not like you could dictate and boom, you could change everything. That's something that frustrates me as well, right? That's part of what drives me to do what I do. Now, when it comes to college, let me be very clear. I would advise everyone not to think about college in a sweeping generalization. Once n equals 30, right? Kind of, if you will, the law of large numbers kicks in, you get a bell curve, right? There's different categories, okay? Now, in most cases, if you're strong enough, you could survive and thrive and do well at a top school, you get the great inter-peer inspiration and learning between students. In addition to the education, you get the network. You get a lot more doors open to you, if you will. There's benefits, right? The alumni network, you get to give back to them, et cetera. But let's face it, there are about 4,000 plus colleges and universities. More and more are dropping off one at a time, especially these small for-profit colleges right now, because they're kind of like tier 2, tier 3. They're not adding much value. They still cost many tens of thousands of dollars for tuition per year. And they're literally going bankrupt one at a time very quickly. In the past couple of years, COVID accelerates a trend right now, okay?
For
But
sure.
if you talk about the very elites, they are doing well. They don't have problems, right? You talk about Harvard, they got close to $40 billion endowment, right? Stanford, it's not as high, but it's up there. Princeton, Penn, they are doing fine. They could afford to have some, they got some wiggle room, right? Not many. If you donate a couple of $1 million to a top, say 30, 40, still top tier university, they'll take your money, your kids in, kind of, right? But if you donate a couple of $1 million to Harvard, they say, you know what, we got so many. I'm sorry, I still cannot admit your kid. I cannot look too bad, right? Because your kid is just far off in the kid's story, if you will, right? Evidenced by essays, rec letters, and maybe interview, and evidenced by the academic performance, right? The rigor, the AP or IBs and stuff like that. And then the test prep, right? I mean, the testing, right? SAT, ACT, SAT subject test, and evidenced by other components within the college application process. It's hyper complex. I'm very deep into doing that with my team, with Team 3EQ, okay? And you're looking at a foremost college admission or college planning application admissions consultant in front of you. Now, going back to your question, it really depends, okay? Some kids are entrepreneurial, right? At least one of my kids, they're kind of entrepreneurial. Some kids like to be great bankers. Some kids want to be doctors. Some kids want to be astronauts. Some kids want to be hyper hard STEM. Some kids are very creative, right? It all depends on the person, right? But the way that I think about things is that, okay, I see, people probably enjoy doing what they do with a skill set in Times Square, in New York City. They get $5 per piece of art. Okay, they probably like what they do. Are they getting rich? They're not, right? But you look at some bankers in Wall Street, some of them kind of like doing what they do, but a lot of them actually hate the job, but they make millions a year, right? Then it's sort of like very mercenary environment. But why don't you do something where you have great impact, okay, emotionally and socially, and you also make a lot of money? You may not make money right off the bat, right? You have to be a little bit more patient, but over the long term, the trend, the curve, you got a lot more pluses on the profit area of the curve, right? Wouldn't that be great? You combine your passion, your interest with something more pragmatic in a career path. So college, given the way, if you go to a kind of a sucky college, you party all the time, do all sorts of bad things, you're not going to go anywhere. Might as well drop out. It's not going to help you, right? But if you take advantage of the resources in there in ways with third-party mentorship, it could actually accelerate and open more doors. And then, people are still kind of, got their emotion, like the hiring managers, or maybe the employer, or maybe the family executive, kind of the CEOs. They went to Georgetown. They went to Warren. Maybe they still prefer, if possible, hire someone in the network, right? So there are still some advantage for going to a good college, but it's really about what you make of what you make of your college life once you're in college, right? College missions and college life are two different things.
For sure. And you hit upon a good point. And I talk about this to my son. The raw education you get, to me, is about 1/3 the value of college. You getting out of this house and becoming independent, consistently making your own bed, getting your own food, coupled with the social interaction of peers that are not from your local community where you went to school, that are going to be more culturally diverse. For many kids, it'll be their first boyfriend, girlfriend. It'll be their first, you know what I'm getting at. So to me, 2/3 of the value of college has nothing per se to do with the education. It's more
Absolutely.
the experience and the networking opportunity. What I'm also a little frustrated by, my nephew is going into his junior year of college, and it's going to be virtual at minimum for the first semester. They already announced it heading into next year. Oh, but the pricing still stays the same. And I think you actually have a group of parents doing somewhat class action lawsuits against universities, and this may get a little ugly.
It is. It's frustrating to me as well. I especially feel bad for all the kids, okay? In fact, my heart goes out to parents of little kids. They are in even more stress. They cannot have their nannies. They cannot kind of, do the things that they used to do with help, right? Because some of them, you don't want to take the risk of attracting COVID. Plus, they have to learn to be teachers. Now, That's for little kids in grade school, right? I feel sorry for the parents, especially for the moms, right? I mean, it's like, man, it's extra stressful for them. The college kids, especially for the fresh high school graduates, be entering freshmen, those are pivotal points. You want to enjoy your high school graduation. They did not, that was taken away from them. They did
For
not have the
sure.
full experience, right? Same thing for college grads. They did not have the full enjoyable experience, right? When my older daughter graduated Georgetown, oh my God, we had a massive party, 3,000 people. We got drunk. So Georgetown is very smart. You kids are above age now. Okay, I'm gonna get you all drunk. Bars everywhere. It's like we were dancing our butt off. We were so much fun, right? And we all in ties and all that. I was like my student ties. I was so, and then I was having so much fun with the kids, right? Whole bunch of kids and parents dancing, and I look forward to one. And you know, it's a very difficult thing, especially for kids that have landed, say, internships this summer. All of a sudden, some companies took it away from them. It's like, oh my God, I'm not able to stack on my experiences. I'm not going to be able to kind of, I mean, you do have to worry about your resume in a genuine fashion, right? Kind of you're building up skill set. At the end of the day, and most kids these days like to work for employers, maybe start their own thing, right? Not so much go back to the family businesses, but for those that want to do the latter, I guide them to optimize and maximize, right? And likewise for the former, optimize and maximize. Is that what employers are looking for is really what I call employable, maybe scalable skill sets and mindsets. That's it. Employers are actually very practical. The reality is that, you know, looking farther, in fact, at the B20, we're very big on that, right? The future of work and education. I see all sorts of patterns and data, and we push that to the G20 governments and the heads of state, is, you know, your learnability, okay? Your adaptability, your resilience, and then your communication skills, your critical thinking, decision-making skills, plus other skills, a lot of soft skills, in addition to certainly the hard skills we want to hire you for, so they can help us solve the problem in a function, in a position that you're in. Those are very important, right? It's really mindset and skill sets. It's a cultural fit as well. Now, for those kids that go to college are not prepared to compete against so many applicants out there for the same job, then you're at a loss, right? So in a way, it's not so much about college, it's really what you make of your college experience. Try to get as high as possible to maximize the probability of winning, short to medium term, position for the long term.
I mean, I look at it as Malcolm Gladwell went to the University of Maryland. Steve Jobs went to a small liberal arts school in Oregon.
Right.
And there's a ton of stories. You don't need to go, it's nice, to Stanford or Harvard to be successful.
Correct.
And is being successful more the network you make at those universities, perhaps more than the actual education itself? It probably is. So that alone may be worth it. But I personally like students I've hired a fair number of interns over the last 4 to 6 months. I like them to have displayed resilience, grit, some level of failure and bounce back. All these Generation Zs are digitally savvy. We're going to get a little bit of that and some of the angst with the baby boomer crowd, et cetera. How important is resilience, grit, overcoming challenges, failures, and bouncing up? How important do you find that for young people?
That is hyper important. And that's part of the pragmatic, emotional, social, and leadership intelligence that I instill into young people, if you will, right? So when you look at the core of the soft skills or part of your operating system or algorithms, in a way, right, is your grit. How do you define grit? Grit is really perseverance or resilience, coupled with some passion, right? And plus your tenacity. And if you're resourceful, that's fantastic. And learnability coupled with grit. Resilience and grit goes hand in hand. How's
Right.
that? Resilience is a core part of grit, right? I'm sure that some of you read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth.
She's wonderful, of
she's
course.
fantastic, right? I love the book. I agree with that. And she defines grit as pretty much a perseverance, resilience, passion, right? With some determination. I agree with that. But on top of that is you know, learnability. When I say that, what do I mean? You want to become, and I see this as a key problem with many families, ultra high net worth families, right? Not many kids are, I mean, some are, but not many kids are super learners. I coach my kids, my students to be super learners, right? You learn very quickly, you're very adaptable, because your operating system and heart and your values and principles are in a way that is teachable, coachable, right?
I mean, how do you help them do that? Suppose, not everyone has a 140 IQ.
Right, right. You don't have to have super high IQ. I don't have a super high IQ. Trust me, my kids don't have super high IQs, but they're doing quite well, right? Many of my students don't have super high IQ. Oftentimes, some employers hire for super high IQ people because of maybe a research job or something, some engineering.
A rocket scientist.
Rocket scientist, right? Then, okay, that's a good joke, by the way. Okay, you can have some room to fail, no problem, except for rocket science engineering, except for brain surgery, right? 1 millimeter of a mistake in a brain surgery, that person is gone, right? A liver surgery, you could give and take half an inch, right? So, but in all cases, I prefer to hire people where you don't have as much experience in that functional area, but I'm certain that you could surpass some people who had more experience than you do because of your learnability, because of your 3EQ, because of your belief system, your strategic thinking, your execution power, right? And pretty much the rest of our soft skills. And those are very, very hyper important. At B20, we have a bunch of line items that we kind of push to the kind of help the world, help serve especially the disadvantaged, the billions of people, so that they could benefit faster and kind of help lift them up. It's, in a way, it's a little bit more philanthropic, right? But going back to the high-end families in this audience, if a next gen, even for a family executive, family office executive who is not that tough, mentally tough, if you will, then I'm gonna help put them aside and maybe give them some training. Very important.
And in terms of helping that person, or especially a younger person, like you said, their brain's not fully developed until they're 26, 28. And even then, of course, we could still be open-minded and learn. How do you help them become better at critical thinking?
Right. I think in my one-on-one mentorship process, right, it's a series of conversations. And I get to understand where they're really coming from, their weaknesses, their strengths. And then for certain areas that are key in honing their 3EQ and 4S and achieve the greatest outcomes, right? Let's say it's college admissions, or maybe the first job, maybe it's an internship, maybe activity, academics, and maybe their career positioning. And that part is sort of weak. Then I would apply the tactical repertoire of weapons that I have in order to guide them, right? It's kind of like, it's got to be visionary and strategic, but there are tactics in order to do so. It's not like, boom, I could change your critical thinking in one day, right? But if I could get you to adjust some habits, maybe stop doing certain things and go deeper into studying this part, and I'm gonna hold you accountable and I'm gonna guide you to execute those parts, then over time, a human being, one of the Forbes articles that I wrote is called College Apps Stanford Anyone, right? At the end, I said that, you cannot expect to put a child into a microwave oven and push 1 minute and a perfect kid's gonna pop out. It's not gonna happen. Honing your heart, your mind, your communication skills, including some of the soft skills, it's like slow cooking. It takes time, right? And here's one example for you, right? It's not like I coach only high achievers, right? I got one student, the dad runs his own family office. He did quite well in asset management, Caucasian. And, when I started coaching him in 9th grade, I realized that, number one, he's actually a very intelligent kid. But here's the thing. He's not an A student. He was a D+ student, a dog plus student. So when I started guiding him, I realized that, and I asked questions being very Socratic, I discovered that he hangs out with the wrong people all the time. spends too much time watching video games. So over time, the synaptical connections and the neurons in his brains, right, is probably orchestrated the wrong way. I said the most important thing at that point is to help them adjust his habits along the way, and also have some framework in his study skills, etc. In 2 years, he transformed to being a D plus student, dog plus student, to be a B plus student, a boy plus student in 2 years. That's fantastic transformation right there, you see. And today he goes to a top tier UC campus in California. That's not a bad deal at all, you see. So it's all honeable. It's all honeable. But one thing I advise is that don't expect things to happen right away. Things don't work like that.
There's two words I'm going to mention. They, in theory, require no skill. So we all could get better at the things that you're talking about by practicing these two very different words: discipline, which you've been hinting at with habits, but I'll bring it back to discipline, and curiosity.
Absolutely.
If you ask questions and you're not afraid of people looking at you saying, "Be quiet, you're interrupting, that's a stupid question," you have such resilience, you don't care what people think about you. These are the traits that I find in successful entrepreneurs. They're
Right.
disciplined, and they're curious, and they don't give you know what about what people think of them.
Right. And in fact, if you are gunning for a top college, right, or a top employer in a coveted job, similar traits that employers and colleges would look for, okay? Discipline, that also could mean the ability to focus deeply on something despite the distractions, right? So part of the how I guide my own kids, right, students, is really to get them to build strong ability to focus, right, despite all the distractions. And it's all doable. You can manage it, make sure not the dark algorithms that are baked in with dozens of PhD in psychology, anthropology, helping hone the algorithms all the time to capture attention, not to be owned by them, but overpower that and manage it so that it's going to be part of your life. I mean, let's face it, kids are going to be on social media, right, etc. But you still are able to focus deeply. One thing that amazes me about some of the high achievers that are Gen Z and teenagers, unlike the boomers and the Gen Xers, right, is that if we flip around, listen, our brain is a single chip device. It's not a multi-chip thing, right? If we flip around, you're not multitasking. You're just flipping between single tasking onto focusing on one thing without depth, and you try to flip back to doing something more important that you do. But sometimes it takes a boomer 20 minutes to try to get back into the peak state to focus, right? But some of the high achieving Gen Zs that I notice is that the brain is wired in ways that are so good, right? Not all of them, some of them, that they could flip back and deep work focus on getting that AP Chem thing and score 5, right? They could do that. So the ability to focus, that discipline, it's a requirement along with grit, learnability, adaptability, agility, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity you mentioned, curiosity. You gotta be intellectually and if not a little bit spiritually or emotionally curious, right? Those are traits that are very important, along with communication, collaboration, people skills, and all that.
We could go down a rabbit hole here, but I'm going to take a step back and what Sir Ken Robinson talks about in K through 12, where we could argue that the university system in the US is, at least on the upper tier, very, very, very strong. We could debate K through 12. What you just mentioned, creativity, curiosity, it makes me wonder the value and power and how you would potentially look to get someone's kids into a Montessori type school.
Okay, first of all, you mentioned Montessori. I love that. I love the system. And I love the holistic approach that they have, especially for kids in K to, say, grade school, correct? That gives them a very strong foundation. We're going further down the age bracket here.
Yes.
You know, when it comes to grade school kids up to middle school kids, I find it to be very crucial, critical, to help them hone strong habits. It doesn't have to be perfect. Once kids go to middle school, they're gonna start defying parents, right? Because of a structure, biology, the culture, the community, the school system, the bullies and all that, right? And even if you go to the top private school, you're going to have that. Montessori is a great system. I love that. So I wrote another Forbes article way back. I think a lot of you are going to enjoy that. It's called Why to Prepare for Top College in 6th Grade. And in that article, I intentionally did not talk about college planning, application, admissions. I intentionally did not talk about academics. I focused on soft skills habits, using my daughters as anecdotes. Because at that time, my younger daughter, age 11, she was so distracted by social media, I call it device addiction. And my wife and I had a deal that I was going to start mentoring her at age 13, but I just took over when she was at age 11, because if she's going to keep on going in this direction, she might become a bit of a loser, right? So I apply a bit of that's why a lot of tactics, right, based on the situation. Then I apply a bit of a boarding school strategy with her. So I made a deal. She listened that, okay, honey, I'm gonna make a deal. Okay, you could do whatever you want, social media, etc., but 10 hours max per week. You could do anything you want within 10 hours, okay? Right? Not dozens of hours wasting the time. And then if you're gonna exceed that, you have to be very honest with me. I'm gonna take away something from you, right? But with lots of love. You cannot do that without lots of love, a good foundation and all that. Lots of love. She feels it, she feels me, and she knows what I do. Over time, her habits transform to be super bad, to be okay, to be strong, to be manageable, right? And then the rest is history. So a bit of a long-winded answer to your—
No, that's a great answer. I'm going to ask you a question that you may take the wrong way. I don't mean it this way, but given some of the class divide that we have now, could I make the argument you're at a very, very high level, I'm assuming expensive? Do rich people, their children have an unfair advantage being able to hire someone like you? And how about people from lesser school districts that don't have the resources, but that may be wonderfully gifted, talented, and hungry, but they're overlooked? And we're seeing so much of this occurring now. What would be a way that they could have greater access to you and companies like yours?
Right. I do take a fraction of my clients, students, and families that are not exactly, very high net worth, right? I do that. And I give them a massive, what I call virtual scholarship, virtual grant, right? And get the unlimited package or the kind of fractional. And that's one way for doing things. Second way is really philanthropy. I work with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. I got my tiny little, kind of a donor advice fund. And I focus on kids, disadvantaged kids, and especially during COVID, I'm kind of like tapped out in giving financially right now, right? But I tell you, the B20, G20, that's how I feel that my mass market contribution comes in, right? Hey, listen, our work directly gets the attention of the presidents and prime ministers and the governments. And youth, disadvantaged women are totally in that equation, right? And there are billions of them. Gen Zers, there are over a quarter. The world's got 7.8 billion people in population. 1/4 today are Gen Z, about that. Soon it's going to be 1/3, including Africa, India, and all that. Most of the kids are totally disadvantaged, right? What can we do to help influence the government and work with pretty much representing the private sector to create a better environment, better structure, at least get it into the system so that the class divide is not going to go farther and farther out, right? So in a way, we're monitoring the governments. We're pushing them. They actually listen to us. They implement, boom. I mean, not all the policies that we recommend. So at least that's my way to giving to the disadvantaged. But you're right. The world is never created fully equal. I totally appreciate equitable equality, not blind equality, right? So when you talk about equality, listen, there are different classes. Imagine you pay $10,000. You get a first class ticket, Singapore Airlines. You fly across the Pacific, right? And you love your neighbors, absolutely. Another guy pay $1,000 for economy. The guy all of a sudden walks to your seat, takes your seat, and say, "Hey, this is my seat. It's equal." Would you like that? No, it's not equitable, correct? So it depends on the context. But you're right. In Silicon Valley, in different places, rich does get rich in some ways, get richer. But I think the important things is that, which is part of what I do, which is so core in my heart, is to what can I do to help produce and create these compassionate, high quality next gen leaders out there. Compassionate, you see. So with the resources you have, you are not only philanthropy, but in the nature of part of your work, or maybe the core part of your work, you're really benefiting truly society in ways that are maybe measurable.
One more question from the audience that I'm going to read, then we'll move on to people probably more in my age bracket or a little younger. But let me read this question to you. Mm-hmm. Jason, how do you think remote learning will affect those seeking a college degree as well as those seeking higher education, master's, MBA, JD, et cetera, when collaborative learning and networking is so essential to the experience? And I mean, we kind of covered this, that basically virtual is not the same, but if you wanted to put a bow on it, I'll let you do that.
Right. I think when it comes to remote learning, long distance learning, say using Zoom, et cetera, for the mature adults, it's very manageable. For the more motivated college graduate students, no problem, right? The more motivated college kids are okay, although they feel some pain. High school kids, iffy. Depends on the power of your mindset already, right? Now, middle school kids, grade school kids, difficult. Because when it comes to middle school kids, grade school kids, they really need to have the in-room, in-park, in-ground, on-ground, social. You know, there's not much that a grade school kid could do except the social, some guidance, et cetera. It's a very different equation, right? So I think ed tech, I formed my previous company. I ran an ed tech company. That's how I formed my previous company, as a merger. I get that part. Right now, ed tech, remote learning is taken off like you wouldn't believe. Zoom, right? Oh my God, right? Welcome to Zoom, by the way. You know, work from home, right? Work from a kind of anywhere in the world. I think one key need that society has right now is, in addition to, say, us on the higher end, in this audience, you and I, right? We're continuously learning and improving because we're cognizant of the importance of that in our own core value system, correct? We also have to take care of many, many tens of millions, hundreds of millions of souls out there that are mature adults with gray, right? Or without gray. Upskilling, reskilling. And part of what we do at a B20 is to try to convince or adjust and motivate and to persuade where we could help more of these people. So at least, you know, they're gonna benefit. They're not gonna go crazy. They're not gonna suffer that much. And that also reduces the probability for future social unrest. So in a way, many things are kind of missionary.
And I might have lied. I guess I do have one more question related to that, but it popped in my head when you were speaking. Silicon Valley taking on changing education, ed tech. Most of us will feel it's been happening a little slow, but now COVID is here. And now colleges are there too many of them? Is their real estate and cost too much? Are many of the bottom third going to drop out and not financially make it? And arguably, is there a way to package up courses and information from top tier universities that you may not get a degree on your wall, but you're going to have a way to digitally interact and learn? And isn't that more important than maybe spending $200,000 or $300,000 with 70 to 80% of what you learn may not be applicable in real life? Is Silicon Valley going to change everything that we know about education in the next 10 years?
Silicon Valley is very innovative, very disruptive. Behind the scenes, there's quite a bit of education innovation going on in every which way. K-12, geographical, different types of training, learning, education, correct? And, you know, I don't think that the top tier college and university system is going to change dramatically anytime soon, except for, you know, the logistical, the kind of semi going back to campus, lots of remote learning, and some adjustments and reduction, force reduction, et cetera, some adjustments to that. But the fact of the matter is that the fierce competition, the hyper competitiveness when it comes to achievers, that doesn't change. So in a way, a student and the families need to learn to be adapt, and how do they optimize and maximize the opportunity. And so at least they're not gonna be competitive disadvantage in the future. I think, but for certain, like there's different categories of students, right, based on the age bracket, and we're still at college right now. We haven't talked about the older folks. We'll address that later, I guess. It really depends, right? Now, certain jobs, they probably might appreciate your skills in this area. That's it, because a manager hire you for those skills to contribute in the immediate professional jobs, right? And a lot of them are not even thinking about promoting you. So, but let's say that if you're grooming yourself to be a leader in certain positions, listen, Wall Street, okay, is still primarily run by an old boys network. Certain jobs is still advantageous for you to get a degree from Wharton, from Georgetown, from Harvard, from Princeton, right? From Dartmouth. In Silicon Valley, what I find is for a lot of the entrepreneurs, some of them actually did not go to top schools, okay? They are millennials, they are Gen Xers, some boomers. And there are a lot of jobs out there, even in tech companies, where you graduate from Harvard, Stanford, you come out, the first job you have, the boss actually went to a school that is lesser than yours, right? Maybe even a tier 2 school. Because the boss really performed, built great connections, right? Listen, connections are important when it comes to career, right? And then the conduct is great. So those skills are there. And back in 2003, I remember I sat down with a board member at Google, and that's where I met my friend, the senior vice president of Google product. We all use this product, Jonathan Rosenberg. And I learned that at that time, they learned, they were so frameworked in how they hire. They hire engineers only from 15 schools. That's it, right? Very biased, right, back then. But today they're much, much open. They're very open to different things, right? And some people they hire did not even go to a top college, but they had the skills and the mindset. So it really depends. Entrepreneurs, I find you don't have to go to a super elite schools, because the resourcefulness,
For sure.
the deviation, the navigation is very, very different. The resourcefulness, you really don't. So it depends on a job, depends on the path of your career.
We're going to transition now, and those that are live, this will be a longer form interview than we normally do. We're probably already about 50 minutes in, and I have a lot more to discuss with Jason. I know some of you at the top of the hour may have to pop off, but again, unless something goes wrong with the recording, we should have it, I hope, up on YouTube and eventually up on our podcast channels. Let's change the age bracket a little bit. And I'm thinking even of parts of my career where we're progressing up the ladder, where we're a manager, we're a founder. The most valuable thing that we have is the quality, in my opinion, of our people. How do we inspire and how do we serve? And what I've noticed as a difference that is a little hard for my generation, again, I'm the oldest, Generation X, I'm from New York. It hasn't been easy for me. I've gotten much better in the last 1 to 2 years. And Keith Ferrazzi has spoken about this. It's
a friend of mine. Yeah.
He's amazing. It's being authentic and vulnerable. And the vulnerable part. So I grew up in high school where wow, look at Jack Welch and look at Lee Iacocca. They're Machiavellian, they're loud, they're a little bit of a whip your butt. And I enjoyed football coaches like Bill Parcells, yellers and screamers, and getting the most out of people. And I think all three of the people I mentioned would have adapted to today's times and been great leaders. Do not take me wrong. But if they did not adapt and you were to go back in time and put them in today's world, I think all of them would be a little bit challenged if they didn't adapt. That style of leadership, especially to younger millennials in this Generation Z, it's a complete failure. It will not work with them.
Oh, so core. I totally hear you. Once you go up the age bracket, on average, right, of course, depends on the person, the 100 billion neurons and the 60 trillion synaptical connections in your brain, plus the 0.5 billion of neurons in your gut from your throat all the way down to where the sun doesn't shine. Those things are slightly more hardwired compared to the more malleable, permeable, coachable teenagers, right? But it's not impossible at all, okay? So And let me throw into the stew here that a soft skill that is also very important these days is called coachability, teachability. Even though you're already worth $50 million, okay? You know, you're running a company and you're worth $500 million. You're running your family office, right? But you're suffering from relationship. Your ex-wife is blocking you from seeing your teenage daughter that you would love to see, but she's blocking you because she hates your guts. Because, you know, you are not, you know, adaptable enough, not vulnerable enough, not humble enough to admit to be forgiven, right? People could be forgiving. It could be mutually forgiving, you see. That forgiveness, that generosity is part of the 3EQ, okay? And especially the multi-generational, and I do this on a daily basis, right? The intergenerational. One reason that I see within family offices, within these sort of ultra network families, right? They're rich financially. Okay, great, wonderful. Wealth, health, it's about financial, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, social, not just financial, okay? Gotta have to be vulnerable enough to realize that so that the family relationships, the peace of mind, in a way, the risk mitigation of the opportunity losses, if you don't do it, it's going to be lower, right? You want to mitigate risk for future issues. You want to have better peace of mind. You want to gel the relationship and that vulnerability, that humility, while applying your wisdom as a Gen Xer boomer, right? To help your staff, to love your kid. That's important. It's a two-way street as well, right? There's some reverse mentoring that I could teach that
For
I teach
sure.
other people as well. Absolutely. Vulnerability, humility, compassion is sort of like humility. Gratitude apply externally. It's kind of like when I talk about principles, it's kind of like your core values, which is your core beliefs, apply externally, socially, right? Emotion is an instant manifestation of your belief system, of your self-talk that reinforce your belief system, and also your physiology. You got to manage that real well. You don't take care of your body. Like for me, I'll stop working if I feel that my 8 hour plus on average of deep sleep per night is threatened, right? That's how I work. You know, that's how I think. It's very important.
And trying to think, and I wanted to actually follow up on that, and maybe we'll do that one later. A little bit of the cross-cultural communication. So in successful families where the founder, the creator is alive, they tend to be a little bit of a dictator. And it kind of works. It centralizes leadership. It's a simple decision-making process, but it's effectively asking for the next generation to either despise it and cause angst between them, or the older son or daughter adapting that style. And now you're going to have, and I've seen it in what I do, once the dad or mom passes away and that sibling who has so-called in charge and does that same thing that maybe didn't quite earn it, you're asking for lawsuits and intra-family squabble on a variety of different topics. How do you encourage a hard-headed, I'm going to get in trouble for this one, baby boomer that's a wealth creator and entrepreneur, has children or grandchildren, and wants their legacy, even if their company's sold, but wants their philanthropic, their family office to survive beyond them? How do you get them to foster greater communication and listening among a younger generation?
Right. That's a great question. I think in order to run a company, and a family is a bit of a mini enterprise, right? It could be a complex enterprise as well, based on the situation. You do have to be a bit of a dictator, but it's wise to be a benevolent dictator, not a communist dictator, right? So that benevolence, that compassion is part of the skills and mindset that I myself hone into these patriarchs and matriarchs that I coach, right? Because if you don't get how things work with the lower or with the younger generations, right? The Gen Xers that are pretty practical, the Millennials, they are typically social impact, etc. And they're learning the digital, the Gen Zs. It's not going to work. The relationship is not there. It's not going to work. Once you pass away, I hate to say it, but you know, let's say your grandparent, you're still the patriarch, then the next gen might just change everything fire your executives in the family offices. Would you like that? Now, if you have the right people.
That happens most of the time. I've spoken about that issue forever.
Yeah, it's so that's part of what I do, right? It's like the how do I say that? It's the code. It's a software code. It's the algorithms, right? It's the how do you gel that overall family unit? Nothing is perfect, but they come to a bit of a better it's kind of indirect, right? One thing that makes me very happy when I say coach young people and also parents, right, is that, yeah, hey, listen, the outcomes we get, the results we got was fantastic, the vertical goal achievements, right? But what I really enjoy is that, Mr. Ma, I really love you because I became a better person. I became a better leader. I'm more compassionate. That makes my heart sing, you see, because then the family communication and relationships improves as a byproduct benefit, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are gonna be 6 foot under soon, you're in bed, you think about the relationships that you have with your kids, with your grandkids. That's the most important thing. If you have a faith, that's something higher as well, right?
Let's take a look at the difference of the generations and how family enterprises, family offices, and companies in general. We're going to stay on the same theme with kind of older Gen X and baby boomers and younger millennials and Gen Zs eventually coming into the workforce. So what advantage does each bring? I would think that age, if you've been successful, brings experience, brings I've been through the ups and know that eventually the downs will come, but it doesn't stay down forever. So hopefully a calming influence. What does youth bring? And again, I've gotten better, I would want the young generation to don't be so respectful that you never question me. I don't want to be anchored in an idea and want confirmation bias. I want the fact that you're young, that you think differently. I want you to ask why. I want you to be curious. And if I think you're overdoing it, then I may put you in your place, but I don't want you to take that personally. So I think youth could bring curiosity and why are we still doing it this way when I think it could be done better? Now, sure, are some of them feel a sense of entitlement? Yeah, I've seen it. And that frustrates people in my age bracket. You know, you're demanding what? Like your own work hours and this and that. You haven't earned it yet.
Right.
And also you see people in my age bracket say, oh, Angelo, but they're not giving me 5 or 10 years. And I say, well, one, you may not be making the future attractive to them, but two, why do you care? If you're going to get creativity, curiosity, tech savviness out of them to benefit your enterprise, maybe it is only meant to be for 18 months, for 2 years, 3 years. That still doesn't make it valuable. How do you have cross-cultural integration within a company or a family office of old and young?
I love it. Angelo, your questions are so deep and so great. You're a very talented questioner, by the way.
I got to shorten my questions, but hopefully they're not half bad.
I love it. I love your questions. It's very deep. And as you can tell, I'm kind of a deep person, right? You know, the older generation, for the ones that are successful, they bring a lot of wisdom. Wisdom comes from great experiences, right? Mostly successes, some failures as well. And you got to be humble and vulnerable enough to reflect on those experiences so that they could kind of get baked into your machine learning, right? I'm just kind of playing with you, right? The kind of machine learning, Silicon Valley, AI, right? AI thing. And, you know, the younger generation on average, right? I mean, there's like a bell curve. There's like super lazy, unmotivated, spoiled kids who drive Lamborghinis, don't care about anything, okay? Those are not coachable. Unless they admit they want to be coached, I could coach them, right? And then you get the vast majority still want to improve. They really want to make a difference, et cetera here. Obviously, the kids are great in digital, right? I apply my younger daughter, for example, to help me do things that have saved me a lot of time. And along the way, I watch her do it, boom, I learn a skill, right? I get them to reverse mentor me in some ways, right? I even wrote a chapter about the digital Gen Z workforce in an ebook, a separate book, not Young Leaders 3.0, right? And in my speaking topics, I speak about how do you, as a leader, as a CEO, as an executive, as a manager, how do you get the millennials and Gen Zs to love you, right? And if you're millennial and Gen Z in a workforce, how do you get the mentors and your superiors and your older colleagues to like you and want to groom you and develop you so you could grow faster than the other kids.
Tell us your secret. How do you do it on both ways?
Man, Angelo, it's kind of like, I cannot tell you all my secrets. It's like, oh, you're Coca-Cola. Could you reveal your secret sauce to you immediately in the show? I'm not going to do that, right?
You're going to give us a little bit.
It's how you talk to them. It's how you understand. I get to understand my clients very deeply, okay? Like an audit, academic audit, social audits, mindset audits, right? Then identify the strengths and the weaknesses and what direction is going to be best fit for you. Sometimes they're not clear. You have to clarify the direction, right? And then it's a honing process, right? While with the practical realization or the focus on helping them achieve the greatest short-term outcomes, right? Because the best way to make progress is to make progress. Have some wins, have some wins.
I agree.
And boom, have the big win, right? Like get the internship, like get into the great college, like solve that relationship issue, like remove that Achilles heel in the mind, soul, or maybe go to a PT or something like that, right? So, and then along the way, there's a lot of conversation. I give them exercises, books to read, and I kind of, and I know a lot of resources, right? Then apply these resources. And then the depth, it's kind of like having a master, like Bruce Lee, right? I was just watching Ip Man 4. It's like, how the hell did Bruce Lee become such a great fighter back then? He got Ip Man, duh, right? Ip Man's gonna tell you that, oh, here's exactly how I do it. Duh, I cannot cover that in 1 minute, right? There's lots of training on the actual tangible skills. There's quite a bit of intangible honing, and a lot of spiritual, a lot of mindset, a lot of honing. And it's a series of conversations, right? Then I kind of compound that and I record that, I capture the data, then it's kind of keep on moving up from there and then maybe help them pivot along the way. So it's not like, I find the long form, just like what we're doing right now, the long form coaching, give me a couple of years or at least a year, or maybe a couple of quarters, and it gives me more time to transform them. Because typically, in a show, they may pick up one or two takeaways, maybe some minor transformation, but over time, it takes time to hone a person. That's how it works.
And I did have a question on that. I'm going to bounce back to that. Let me go in a little bit of a different direction. Basically, it relates to positive outcomes, two words, positive outcomes, that when I coach single family offices, I use a lot. So what I've learned a little bit is, this is basic, but people overlook it. Focus on leadership, culture, systems, and processes. Do not be married to the plan that you come up with.
Yes.
Because the facts and importances may change. And just because it's your plan or the team's plan, you become too married to it no matter what. An example is, I want to lose weight and I'm running or using the treadmill. Great. But you could accomplish the same thing by other forms of aerobic exercise should the weather get bad outside. Generally, I find that sometimes people a little more in my age bracket, we tend to get a little married to our plan as opposed to knowing when to adapt. I give the example, it's super popular now on the show Netflix, on the company Netflix. It's called The Money Heist. And the character, the professor, who's an amazing deep thinker, planner, and systems person, but knows when it's time to change the plan and not be married to it.
Right. Great point. It's called culture eats strategy or plan for breakfast, right? It's a classical proverb by the late great management guru, Peter Drucker.
The best,
culture.
Yes.
Culture, what's culture? Culture is a set of values and beliefs that really is powerful, that is empowering, that is not communist dictatorship, but it's benevolent dictatorship, but work together with family members that really feel right? And sometimes you have to stop the leak and stop here. We have to make a decision, right? Otherwise, it's going to take forever. You're going to all grow gray, right? So that culture, that family values and principles are very important. Lots of ultra high net worth families don't do that, right? And part of what I do is to help them, make them realize what's important, maybe document that. And if a plan is not gonna really work, it's gonna cause a lot of heartaches, a lot of headaches, then maybe it's time, if you're vulnerable enough and coachable enough, to maybe make a pivot, maybe adjust it. It doesn't have to, you don't have to throw away the baby with the bathwater. Maybe some, it's kind of like product feature enhancement. How's that, right? It doesn't have to be a new product development that replace what you have. In certain cases, you might need to do that in order for you to have the innovation within a family to rise up and move to the next steps, right? So it kind of depends on the situation. But if you're so rigid, it's called fixed mindset, that it's not going to work. Fixed mindset is going to equal semi-death in the future. You got to have a growth and contribution mindset with love and compassion and connection.
I could argue
identity.
We're going through it now with COVID.
Yeah.
Are people born or learned how to thrive and stay mindful during chaos?
People say that, oh, must be your genes, right? Environment. I just don't buy that at all. Maybe
I agree.
part of that is your genetic, your DNA, et cetera here. But I believe that the vast majority is really environmental, is learned, okay? Trained, learned, educated, experiences. You could pick it up, you could hone it, right? And I mean, you and I are examples probably. I don't know, right? I think it's all honeable. I think the good news part of the mindset to have is that we must constantly and everlastingly improve. And celebrate your wins, celebrate the positive, celebrate your children, celebrate the next gen, celebrate that we're gonna get through this, right? It might take a while for the full economy to come back, but there are a lot of silver linings in between. So I think overall, my encouragement is make sure to reflect a bit, make sure, hey, do I have a deadly, fatalistic, fixed mindset somewhere? And what can I do to improve, right? Should I kind of listen to a lot of podcasts, audiobooks, get help, third party, whatever, right? Take a course. Make sure that the mindset, which is pretty much your belief system, your attitude, kind of the state of mind, right? Emotional, mental state of mind, is fluid enough that you want to keep growing and contributing.
Reminds me a little bit of something that has helped me, and I don't do it as religiously as I should. Of course, I coach executives to do it. Shoemaker's son, I should be doing it more myself. I find something that's very powerful in helping to make decisions. It's to journal when you make decisions, how you felt, what's the process you used. And you might end up making the wrong decision per se, but you could go back and learn. But here's my add-on twist to it. But this requires vulnerability, Jason. Mm-hmm. I think you should share it with your team, with your superiors, with your underlings, with your interns. Here's my journal book for this week. I think we should all be sharing, not our personal family life, but how we're making the key decisions so we could each learn from each other in the group, whether I'm 67 or whether I'm 22. Am I wrong?
I think that's a great tactic because it reveals that, number one, as a top leader, you're a human being. You're not a machine, right? Especially for the younger people, they especially need to see that. They need to see that you care enough about them. Oftentimes, as young people, it's about them. That's how they think, right? They're not yes. wise enough to realize to give back more, right? They're still kind of honing themselves. They need to see that from a top leader. If all they see is dictation or this, your CEO or VP or whatever, or CIO, Chief Investment Officer, it's kind of like all they talk about is your wealth accumulation, wealth protection, tax savings, etc. It's kind of like they're freaking machines, right? I'm not gelled into that, especially the younger people, millennials and Gen Z especially. I want to see human being. I want to feel loved. I want to feel that you're actually helping me directly or indirectly. Part of that is that you are vulnerable and humble enough to reveal that, and you learn that about yourself, and we also learn from you. My own kids, by the way, my 2 children, they love seeing that from dad. I reveal to them what I learned. It's called debrief, right? And I admit my faults, my apologies. I made a mistake there, but I learned from that. They want to see that. They want to feel that.
I'm going to It's going to give a little bit of a secret from my upcoming masterclass on creating an anti-fragile family office, but I learned about the term, and he didn't invent it, but it's going to be very applicable for single family offices, in my opinion, moving forward within the family and the family office. And that's to effectively have what Matt Wesley and others call a chief learning officer. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs of his description of it because I think it's probably the best lead into it of anything that I've read or heard. And Matt, for people that don't know, is kind of a legendary figure in the family office world. It says it's about capacity and capability to the family to sustain personal, cultural, and financial well-being for generations. Well, what does that mean, capacity and capability? Capacity is building revolves around the underlying ability of the family to adapt to changing and challenging circumstances, whereas capability development has to do with gaining the skills associated with the management of personal finances, trust structures, governance, business, and philanthropy. What do you think about families and family offices having someone acting as even if it's outside, maybe it's better from outside the group, a chief learning officer?
Chief learning officer, chief mentoring officer, I get that pitched to me sometimes by people. I think it's about time we are thinking in that direction, right? You think about family office, you may have the CEO who might be the principal himself or herself, right? And then you have the CIO. It could be a third party. And the traditional family office, which is still kind of new in certain parts of the world, is really still about wealth accumulation, wealth protection, some other admin, and then some tax tricks of the trade and things like that, right? It's really, when I speak, I speak quite a bit in family office conferences, and it's like, oh my God, it's like boring as hell, right? But the soft side, gelling the soft side, making sure that the how to say that, the software in the entire framework is really it's a learning machine in a way, right? It's a learning machine. I think it's a great idea, Angelo. I think about time we should have that type of role.
It's a little classic, but some of the things that I've learned, and you hear family office governance. So governance is how we make decisions.
Correct.
Corporations have used it. Families that built great enterprises have used it, yet somehow it doesn't make its way often into the family office. What a surprise.
Yeah.
In terms of governance, how would you look at defining purpose, governance, how we make decisions, and then identifying values, mission, and vision? Is that important, or is that professor gobbledygook and is not real life stuff?
I think it should always be aligned.
I agree.
If absolutely, if your framework, including your governance, okay, just like corporate governance, are not aligned with your core values and principles, and try to make it brief, not some freaking one pager that people cannot remember. Things that are memorable, things that are emotionally and also intellectually and logically ingrained in people's mind and soul, right? That's called good values that they believe in. Like very high achievers, even though, working in top companies, coveted jobs is super, super hyper competitive, but they still like to work for a cause that they believe in. And in order for them to believe in the cause, the values and principles and the culture, in addition to the problem that they solve, it's got to be congruent with what makes them tick, right? And along the way, they learn quite a bit. So I think it's all intertwined. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, the one that I'm starting to even put towards the top of the list, and values to me relates to what families often do in governance, call a family constitution. But I'm becoming more intrigued by vision because it's a high level aspiration. Sometimes the problem I see with it is it tends to look 5 or 10 or longer years out, and that's good, but you probably need to have, in my opinion, a 90-day plan. And then you need to take a look back before you look forward to the next 90 days. What worked, what didn't work? Is this still a priority for us? Have different factors, COVID-19, changed our vision? If you set it and forget it, it's not going to work.
I think a vision is still kind of a longer term, how the world is going to look in the future if it's going to be a bit of a semi-movie, right? And how all the actors in it, including us, is going to be in that movie achieving things that we want to achieve, right? You're painting a visionary movie in the future. That's a vision for you. What you're really talking about is some kind of short, medium term checklist, not exactly checklist, but kind of a sub-mission, sub-key goals to achieve. So for example, at the B20, one key product that we produce is to come up with recommendation or policy recommendations, right? Future work education, digital, trade and finance, right? Infrastructure, even a little bit anti-corruption. Now we have a women council, et cetera, right? And what recommendations would be great to feed into the eyes and ears of the Trump administration, of the President Xi, of the G20, right? But because of COVID, we totally pivoted. Then we focus a lot more on how do we help shape the world where it's going to help minimize and reduce the pain of the labor market, right? How do we make it a bit more adaptable, more resilient? So people is going to experience less pain, remove more barriers, get people to be more collaborative, et cetera, et cetera. So it depends on the market, family, industry, macro, micro conditions. You have to be, that's part of adaptability, right? But overall, the good family vision doesn't change much at all. The values don't change much at all, because that's core to your system, isn't it?
Relating a little bit to that, I used to talk more about, and I think it's important in its own way, the family brand and the reputation. But a wise VC in family office named Fred Nazim told me, just focus on this one word with your children, your grandchildren: development of character, ethics, morals, doing the right thing, being a steward of the family. Even when you're coaching younger people, do you look for an inner sense of their character? And could character, if it looks like it's trending off the tracks when they're a younger teenager, how do you bring it back and get them to realize the importance of following the right path?
Right, absolutely. When I say visionary story in my 4S model, that includes character, right? Character is pretty much, how do I say it, part of your values and beliefs system, including principles that are really baked into your behavior, your attitude, right? And people could see patterns of your behavior and that pretty much come up if they sort of reverse engineer that to be your character per se, right? Your personal qualities. And those are very important, by the way, even as a college application component. People need to feel and see that, right? It's a character that they really like. You're not going to be a serial killer, right? Or, you're going to be, you're really a good person, right? You really want to help change the world or something like that, correct? Same thing for a ultra high net worth family. And you have to kind of look at the bell curve of the different types of next gen, honing their character. I do that all the time. It's very core, deep in my heart, when I hone the mentor and guide and inspire the next gen. The character part is super important. When I say talk to the matriarchs and patriarchs, it's not like I'm going to directly hone the character. It's not the right thing to do. But indirectly in the conversations, I get them to be a bit more open, to be more receptive, so that invisible channel between them and the next gen, it's a bit clearer, cleaner, right? And then along the way, their character is being uplifted. I think it's very important in order to have that family legacy and the vision realization in the future.
With some of the 4, 5, and 6 generation families that I know and have as members and I've gotten to know over the years, one of the common threads they had is using philanthropy as a tool to teach the younger generation stewardship, empathy, the importance of giving back to a community.
Right.
In some ways, I'm sensing that's not as strong with some of the latter generations of wealth creators I've seen. They could learn from those that came before them and have lasted generation after generation. How important is philanthropy?
The traditional philanthropy is really from the older folks with gray hair, right? And they give quite a bit. And philanthropy could be in the flavors, traditionally financial, and also your time, energy, connections, and know-how, correct? So you give in ways. Now, when it comes to the younger generation, the millennials and the Gen Z is sort of like millennials on steroids, but younger, right? They get to learn from the millennials, but don't have some of the bad habits, if you will. It's a very interesting differentiation, but also congruent similarity as well. You know, their philanthropy doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to spend our time giving money, right? Kind of identifying the causes we want to give, like a Bill Gates Foundation. Their sense of philanthropy might be, I'm going to get myself involved in a cause that really I believe in socially, maybe an environment, climate, some social engineering, some impact, right? Maybe impact investing. And they, you know, not all of them, but they think and feel in ways where they want to help fix some of the problems that they think is caused by the boomers or something like that. So it's a very different equation on how they think and act. It doesn't have to be traditionally running a foundation. Now, some of them are certainly involved, right? They want to learn. It really depends on a person. You know, I think if you don't, you know, one of our favorite ways, one of our favorite tactics that I advise is, if you don't want to have the headaches of starting kind of a 503c or something like that, a nonprofit, just go for something like the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, right? Then set up your own donor advised fund. Mark Zuckerberg donated $1.5 billion years ago, right? It's like, he doesn't have to worry about the headaches of running the own nonprofit to give, right? No admin, no people to hire and all that. It's just straight giving. You could dictate to who you want to give. So depends.
As probably my last question, which relates to some of the work that you do, so it's a perfect tie-in to a last question, and giving away a little bit of some of my secrets and some of my things I've written about and some work that I do, is in consultant circles, it's known as a tabletop exercise. Others say it's red cell. Others may call it the ability of, we all have blind spots. No matter how talented or how open-minded we think we are, and family offices could get very, very siloed. Would they benefit from having an other set of eyes, ask questions, challenge them on some assumptions, and look for them to have other solutions than maybe what they're coming up with what's important to that family? And this goes into the work that I do on being resilient and anti-fragile, often with things that you don't see coming, and how to benefit and profit from it. Mm-hmm. So would you work with families and their family offices in a way that would be in the way that I described, whether you call it, you know, the old army of red cell attack, a white knight service to the family, challenging their assumptions and what they do? How important is it that we get out of our silo and our anchoring in our thoughts to have outside perspectives?
I think it's vital. I think it's vital. Like for me, I work directly with the families, right? The family members. I work directly with the next gen and with the parents, right? And if I work with family office executives, then I guide them, depends on the structure of a deal that I have. But I think, let me give you one example. One common phenomenon. There are industries out there, you know, thousands of smaller industries, some big industries, right? Have you noticed that when you go to a given industry, like real estate versus a certain type of family office versus certain types of hotel, right? Certain technology. A lot of the people on average, they do things in ways that are kind of fixed within their industry. So part of what I do is that, why don't I kind of help you cross-learn and cross-adapt some parts from some other industries? I've been involved with many industries, right? Based on my consulting and past kind of technology executive experience, founder experience, I've seen quite a bit about different verticals, right? But what I learned is that many different verticals and industries got very interesting and effective ways for doing things. But certain things could be adapted to here. Certain things could be adapted to here. Then you could mix in your stew, in your machine. Then you could kind of hone or improve your algorithm in the ways. It's called process innovation. Innovations comes in technology, product, services, process, business model. Isn't it true? So why don't you be more open to the process innovation so that the outcomes are going to be higher? The relationships are going to be better. Family between family offices, within the family in different generations. And you're going to gain better peace of mind, right? And you also mitigate risk by doing that. That's part
Very true.
of the adaptability. Yes. That's part of the agility. That's part of the resourcefulness, the grit, the soft skills, the 4S, 3EQ that I've been talking about.
And actually, one last question related to all that. It's kind of my version of Tim Ferriss asking, what's your morning routine?
It's an old friend of mine, great guy.
So my audience is going to know this one all too well. This one I learned from Air Force Colonel Boyd, and I added one to it, but it's basically the importance in today's world. Let's focus on family, family office, and family enterprise. The determinant factors are, number one, your people, the ideas your people come up with, the technologies that you're advancing, and then I added the importance of systems or processes.
Right.
One, would you rank them differently? And is there anything I'm leaving out that's not covered by those four?
Are you talking about in the context of a family office, or
more so in the family office? Yes.
Okay, that's kind of congruent or similar to how you build a great tech company. Okay. And one of the first articles I wrote, it went viral with the younger generation. It's called 12 of Today's Most Impressive Young Entrepreneurs. It's got about 0.25 million hits, right? And it's team, okay, people, the culture. Much of a culture is dictated by the founders. Okay, the soul, the spirit of founders are important. Product market fit, okay? Pandemic has shifted many product market fits in different companies, right? You have to pivot in certain ways. And, you know, absolutely, if it's technology, you cannot just use Excel spreadsheets all the time, right? You have to take advantage of some of the technology. And that's part of the upskilling, reskilling for some of the more fixed mindset executives in there. They have to learn to adapt, right? Maybe the next gen could help with that as well. And then along the way is really about, you know, your innovation. And then you have to kind of, the deal flow, right? I'm involved with deal flow as well, right? In different places, global, Silicon Valley, in Asia, et cetera. And, you know, the deal flow, how do you build the relationship, pave the path, grease the path, establish different channels, in addition to the trusted cross family office referrals, co-investing, direct investing, being an LP or direct investing or impact investing, different ways, right? So all, you know, there are different routes to go to Rome. And how do you optimize and maximize your opportunities and creating greater outcomes towards Rome? So it's all, you know, it's a fun equation, right? I have a lot of fun in this equation all the time. So
yeah, that's a great one. We could do effectively a whole podcast about that, but I've taken a lot of your time. For those people that watch or hear this or listening to it live that would like to learn more about Jason Ma and the work that you do, whether it's with family offices, with Fortune 500 companies, with family enterprises, with children that want to make something of themselves, whatever it might be, website, email, how could they learn more?
I think the simplest way is go to my website, 3EQ.com. My contact information is all
Is
there.
the 3 spelled out or it's a letter?
You have to spell out the letter, THREEEQ.com, 3EQ.com, 7 characters, .com. And if you want to email me directly, it's jma, J-M-A, Jack, Michael, Apple, @3EQ.com. But go to my website, everything's there. So there's a lot of actionable insights for you. It's complimentary. And you can learn quite a bit about the backdrop and the importance of why I do what I do to groom the next gen, as well as helping businesses, right? So in a way, people look at me as a bit of a mentor and rainmaker, as well as being a professional speaker and masterclass leader.
This was fantastic. It's one of my favorite interviews. I think you're great. I can't wait to when physical events become the norm again and we integrate some of that into the current. We would love to have you back, and additionally podcasting on some of the deeper points we didn't have quite of a chance to do an even deeper dive of because I wanted to be more broad. I do have to give a close. It takes about 90 seconds. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of Angelo Robles's Effective Family Office podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart, and other platforms. Also, this video and many others are up on my YouTube channel. I got the real estate very early, 12, 13 years ago. So I am Family Office on YouTube. Simply look up Family Office channel. I'm the founder and CEO at Family Office Association, a global membership organization dedicated to families of great success and their single family offices, hosting a tremendous amount of original proprietary content, hosting global programmings on hold because of COVID, but as opposed to doing 15 or 20 programs a year, I'm technically now doing 200 a year. They just happen to be usually Monday through Friday digitally. So it's a little bit of a different paradigm, but for many, it's even better than the old way of doing things. We're outputting content original like never before, and we have a tremendous amount of consultative and masterclass programs that we're offering complimentary to our members. There'll be a fee, of course, for those that aren't. And we encourage you, if you're qualified, to look into membership in Family Office Association. I'm easily followed on social media, including younger platforms like Instagram, where we're Family Office Association on that. And my website is familyofficeassociation.com, and email is angelo@familyofficeassociation.com. Thank you to our live audience, those that will watch this on YouTube or hear it on the podcast. And a special thank you, of course, to our great guest, Jason Ma. Jason, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Angelo. It's been meaningful and a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.